Welcome to KU Padasala. My name is Chad A. Haag. I am an author and former teacher from the United States of America, and I'm very excited today to have the opportunity to discuss with you the very important topic of German for reading knowledge. Now that we have established the historical and sociological similarities between English in the previous lesson, we can now move on to actually learning some phrases within German. And the logical place to begin would be with greetings. Now, you may have noticed even within English, the greeting that you use is largely determined by what time of day it is, so learning greetings is basically also learning times of day. You've noticed that if it's first thing in the morning, rather than just say hello, you'll probably make reference to the morning by saying, in English, good morning. Well, so too in German, you say guten Morgen, which is those two words, guten, good, and Morgen, morning. If it's the daytime and you're just kind of generally saying hello, rather than specifically making reference to morning, evening, or night, you'll say guten Tag. Here, once again, we have a very close similarity between guten, good, and Tag, day. If it's the evening time, we say guten Abend. Abend and evening already sound very similar also. But with good night, we see something is a little bit different. Here we have gute Nacht rather than guten Nacht. Now you might wonder the first time you hear it, why is it that we have an exception here in the form of the adjective good? And the reason for that is ultimately going to be related to grammatical gender, which we will cover very soon, but for the moment, we'll just treat these as set phrases. If you want to say goodbye, you will say auf Wiedersehen. Now that might sound like a mouthful, but if you look closely at Wiedersehen, it's actually a combination of two shorter, more basic words. These are wieder, which is again, and sehen, which is to see. So auf Wiedersehen is really more like see you later within English. If you want to say see you tomorrow specifically, you'll say bis morgen. Oh, we recognize that word morgen. That's morning. This is kind of like in Spanish language, mañana, see you then. So we'll go ahead and repeat these one more time. I want you to pronounce these words with me. Guten Morgen. Good morning. Guten Tag. Good day. Guten Abend. Good evening. Gute Nacht. Good night. Auf Wiedersehen. Goodbye. Bis morgen. See you tomorrow. Now, if we're traveling to a German-speaking nation, it would be useful to know some other basic politenesses. We want to know how to say things like thank you, please, etc. Well, these are also very close to the English language. The word danke in German is very similar to thanks within English. Now, you might be surprised to learn that please and you're welcome are actually both the same word in German. This is bitte, but this will become second nature to you as you speak the language. Saying excuse me is Entschuldigung, while I am sorry is es tut mir leid. This is kind of like it causes me sorrow, but for the moment we'll just treat this as a set phrase, es tut mir leid. If you want to say yes and no, in combination with please and thank you, we can say ja bitte as yes please. Here ja is yes, and if we want to say no thank you, we'll say nein danke. Here again, nein is no, very similar to the English. So we'll repeat these one more time. I want you to pronounce with me. Danke is thank you. Bitte is both please and you're welcome. Entschuldigung is excuse me. Es tut mir leid is I am sorry, or more literally, it causes me sorrow, basically, but we'll just treat it as I'm sorry. Ja bitte is yes please, and nein danke is no thank you. Now, just a few slides ago, we noticed that guten Morgen and gute Nacht had different forms in the adjective good. And the reason why we see that difference is ultimately that there are different genders within the German language. Now, gender is something which does exist on a grammatical level within English. It's not that we don't use it at all. It's just that it applies to a very small number of cases. These are typically really farm animals that we use them for. We have an understanding that a cow is a gendered word that refers to a female of that same species. If it's a male, it's not a cow, it's a bull. So cow and bull are gendered terms, which are not really interchangeable for one another. Other farm animals show the same trend. We have the ewe as a female sheep and a ram as a male sheep. We have a billy as a male goat and a nanny as a female goat. We have a boar as a male pig and a sow as a female pig, and so on. But whereas gender is a fairly rare phenomenon in English and is in many cases actually optional. You may have noticed when the media talks about a female actress within Bollywood, they'll sometimes refer to her as an actor. Sara Ali Khan might be referred to in the newspaper as an actor, even though you might say that she's really an actress, but we have an understanding that that gendered term is optional. Well, it's not that way at all within the German language. Not only do farm animals and other living entities with a biological sex have a grammatical gender, which will have a different form than the other genders will have. Masculine and feminine and neuter, they all have different forms based on gender. It's rather that every word has some sort of a gender. And therefore, you have to always learn the gender of the word when you learn the word. It's not just that you learn this vocabulary and then later on you find out whether it's masculine or feminine. You always learn it. And the way that you do that is through learning the vocabulary word along with the determiner or definite article which precedes it, which will tell you based on its form whether it is masculine, feminine, neuter, or we also have another form if it is plural. Now we'll go through these 4 articles right now with the realization that these are only 4 out of 16 total forms, which may sound very strange the first time you hear it. After all, in English, there is only one form for the word the, which is the definite article. So you might ask, how on earth could there be 16 different forms, even if we take into account the relevance of something like gender or even number? Well, the other reason which accounts for there being 16 rather than 4 forms is the grammatical phenomenon of case. Now, case is something which, once again, it's not that we don't have it at all within the English language, it's just that it has over time come to apply to an extremely small number of cases. Really, at this point, case is something we only use for the personal pronouns. We have an understanding that I and me are maybe both referring to the same person, but they're to be used in different contexts because I refers to this person as the subject of the action of the verb within the sentence, but me refers to this person as the object of that action. For example, if I'm playing dodgeball in physical education class in high school in America, if I hit them with the ball, I'm the one throwing the ball, but if they hit me with the ball, they're the ones throwing the ball, and I'm the one who's receiving the action. So we have an understanding that the difference between I and me is subjective and objective, but more specifically, this is one of the very few cases in which case is still used within English. But as could be expected within German, case is always relevant, not only for personal pronouns, but even when you're dealing with basic nouns like the words for farm animals, the words for tables, chairs, all of that. And the way that you deal with this is through systematically learning the cases one at a time, starting now with the subjective case, which is formally called the nominative case. The 4 forms of the word the, adjusted for gender, number, and the nominative case are as follows. Masculine singular nominative is der. Feminine singular nominative is die. Neuter nominative singular is das, and plural nominative is die. That is the case, by the way, whether the things it's referring to would be in the singular, masculine, feminine, or neuter. Now, we'll go ahead and consider some examples to make this more concrete with considering the word der Mann as a very logical place to start. The man is obviously going to be masculine in gender because a man is masculine in the literal biological sense. But it's not just men or bulls, etc., which would be grammatically masculine. Also things which do not have any actual gender in reality will still be categorized largely on an arbitrary basis within one of these genders. A great example of this is der Tisch, which is the table. So too, der Stuhl is the chair and is also masculine, and der Student is masculine, but only if it refers to a student who is himself considered to be male. So we'll go ahead and repeat these one more time. I'd like you to pronounce with me. Der Mann is the man. Der Tisch is the table. Der Stuhl is the chair. And der Student is the student if male. Now, as could be expected, there's another form for a student if it's female, or more specifically, if it's within the feminine gender, and this is die Studentin. You may have noticed that another difference, in addition to changing the article from der to die, is that there is a suffix in at the end, which might be compared to the suffix s within English. We can say that Brad Pitt is an actor and Angelina Jolie is an actress, because the s suffix denotes that the same word has been put into an explicitly feminine form. So too in German, der Student and die Studentin can be separated as masculine and feminine on such terms. We have also the word for woman as die Frau, and the arbitrarily feminine university as die Universität. So pronounce with me one more time: die Frau, the woman; die Studentin, the female student; and die Universität, the university. Now, German differs from Romance languages like Spanish or French or Italian in that, in addition to having masculine and feminine gender, it also has a neuter gender, which is neither. This is kind of like in English, the difference between he, she, and it. This is one rare case where we have a clear distinction within modern English between the masculine case, or excuse me, the masculine gender, he, the feminine gender, she, and the neuter gender, it. But this is something which applies to a far larger scope of reference within the German language, because it is not just those inanimate objects which are called its within German, like, for example, das Haus. It makes sense that you would call the house an it, because it is neither masculine nor feminine, or das Bett. It makes sense that you would call the bed an it, or das Buch, the book. Would make sense to call it an it. But even some human reference, which might have a literal biological gender, which is, say, feminine, for grammatical reasons, might be included within the neuter gender. Great example of this is das Mädchen. Now, das Mädchen is the little girl, but because we use das, we literally refer to the little girl as an it. The generic word for a child, das Kind, is also within the neuter gender, so a little kid is an it. So go ahead and repeat with me one more time. Das Kind, the kid; das Mädchen, the little girl; das Haus, the house; das Bett, the bed; and das Buch, the book. Now, all of this will probably seem extremely intimidating the first time you see it. How on earth could somebody memorize the gender, not just of a handful of farm animals, as would be the case in English, but for all words whatsoever? Well, you'll be comforted to know that there are certain clues for deducing the gender of a noun simply through looking at its form. And we will go through these one by one. We have a sense, for example, that the noun we are dealing with is probably in the masculine gender if it is referring to people, animals, or professions which are masculine in the real world also. A great example of this is father. Der Vater is masculine because if you're talking about somebody's father, you have an understanding that that's masculine in the real world. Der Freund is another great example of this. The friend, but one that is masculine. There is, of course, a different form for a female friend, which we will get to a little bit later. Der Hahn, the rooster. We have an understanding that even in modern English, a hen is a female of that species. Well, it makes sense that in German, a Hahn is just the male version of the same animal. Der Stier is the German word for a bull, which is probably ringing a bell for you if you've heard the farming term in, say, America, talking about a certain kind of bull as a steer. Well, really, that comes from the German word for a bull in general. Der Gott, God is thought of as masculine traditionally in the West because of the influence of, say, Christianity for centuries. Within Germany, it would make sense that God would be an inherently masculine term. But also, der Künstler, this is an artist, but specifically one considered to be masculine. We'll now move on, though, to consider certain endings which predictably tell you that you're dealing with one gender over another. One of these endings is ER. Now, this is an ending which we also use within the English language. If we have the notion of work, we will say that the person who does work is a worker, because is a suffix which draws that connection. So too within German. An Arbeiter, or more specifically der Arbeiter with the proper definite article preceding it, is a worker for just the same reason. So too, Wissenschaft is science, and a Wissenschaftler, or what we call in English a scientist, is really more of a sciencer. We have that morpheme in German to show that more explicitly. So too, the writer is der Schriftsteller, and the ballpoint pen is der Kugelschreiber, because schreiben is to write, so a certain kind of writer as a device is a certain type of Schreiber, in this case, der Kugelschreiber. You may be surprised to know that certain classes of words are thought of as being inherently one gender more so than another. A great example of this is that the days, months, and seasons are thought of as being masculine within the German language. For example, making reference to Monday, something we don't really pair with a definite article in English. In German, you'd refer to Monday as der Montag. So to Wednesday, or midweek, would be der Mittwoch. October, as a month, is der Oktober. And even the seasons, der Winter, winter, and der Sommer, summer. So go ahead and repeat after me. Der Montag, Monday, der Mittwoch, Wednesday, der Oktober, October, der Winter, winter, and der Sommer, summer. There are other endings in addition to er, which give you a clue that you are dealing with a noun in the masculine gender. These include IG, ICH, ING, AST, and MUS. Now that might seem like a really long list, but we'll just consider a few examples, and this will become second nature over time. Der König, ending in IG, is the king. Der Teppich, ending in ICH, is the carpet. Der Sperling, ending in ING, is the sparrow. Der Palast, ending in AST, is the palace. And der Sozialismus, ending in MUS, is socialism. Once again, der König is the king, der Teppich, the carpet, der Sperling, the sparrow, der Palast is the palace, and der Sozialismus is socialism. Now we have to move on from masculine to feminine. Are there any clues we can have to know that we are dealing with a noun in the feminine? Well, there are quite a few of them. We'll begin with the more obvious route of acknowledging that those nouns which are thought of as feminine in reality are likely to be feminine in grammatical gender too, such as somebody's mother. The mother is predictably feminine, die Mutter, just as the hen, die Henne, is predictably feminine, just as the rooster was predictably masculine. Now, you'll notice that we learned der Freund is masculine a few slides ago, but now we encounter the feminine version, die Freundin. That in suffix is once again kind of like the S suffix within English. We know that an actor and an actress are distinguished in terms of gender because of the presence or absence of that suffix. We also have die Kuh, which is a direct cognate of the English word cow, once again different from the word for a bull, which is der Stier. Then we have the goddess with the ein suffix after God to explicitly say, no, we're not talking about the Christian God who was thought of as masculine. We're talking about one of the goddesses of, say, Greek or Roman mythology. We're talking about a goddess like Athena, for example. Okay, then we use die Göttin. And finally, we have the feminine version of artist, die Künstlerin. So once again, repeat after me, or say with me, die Mutter, the mother, die Freundin, the friend, die Henne, the hen, die Kuh, the cow, die Göttin, the goddess, and die Künstlerin, the artist. You may be surprised to know that one category of nouns which is inherently thought of as predictably feminine within the German language is actually most trees, fruits, and flowers. Just as the days of the week and seasons were thought of as being inherently masculine within German, so too the names of, once again, fruits, trees, and flowers. We find the following examples: die Tomate, tomato; die Rose, the rose; and die Eiche, the oak. We do have a collection of endings which occur very often within the German language which give a clue that you are dealing with a feminine noun. These include ei, ie, ik, in, ion, het, sch, aft, ta with an umlaut over it, t, ung, and ur. Now that might sound like a huge unmanageable list the first time you hear it, but you will notice these as you read German very often occurring, and you'll get a sense that these are feminine in nature. For example, when you're talking about a bakery, that is die Bäckerei with that I ending at the end. Die Gesundheit, or health, the thing you say to people when they sneeze in America. Well, die Gesundheit, referring to health as a noun, derived from the adjective gesund, which is healthy. That gives you a sense that this is feminine because it has that heit ending. Die Gesellschaft is the society ending in the feminine ending schaft. Die Hoffnung is the hope, and die Universität is the university. So once again, say with me, die Bäckerei, the bakery; die Gesundheit, the health; die Gesellschaft, which is the society, die Hoffnung, which is hope, and die Universität, which is the university. Now we move on to the neuter class of nouns. Now, one of the suffixes which we have already encountered in the case of das Mädchen, we now learn what exactly that suffix means. If you have a maid, that is a very archaic English term for a woman. You talk about a milkmaid as somebody who, is tasked, specifically the female, I should say, who's tasked with that job with regard to the cow every morning. And maid is a very old word, which we understand to refer to some sort of a woman within English, but das Mädchen goes from a full-grown woman to a little girl after having the chen suffix tacked onto the end of it. And we learn now that this is something called within linguistics a diminutive suffix. We have these also within the English language. They allow us to describe something as being smaller or cuter than would otherwise be the case. A cigar is a full-size thing about this big, but a cigarette is a little cigar, quite literally. That's what the et suffix is telling us. So cigarette is a cute and little version of a full-size cigar. So too in German, chen and lein are diminutive suffixes because they tell us that das Mädchen is a little girl, das Buchlein is a little book, and das Männlein is a little man. Other words within the German language which are predictably neuter based on ending include words ending in O, which typically come from foreign origin. For example, an automobile is a car in the English language and comes to be shorted to an auto, which gets imported into the German language as a foreign word with that O, which is maybe different from what you would find normally within the German language. So this foreign word ending in O, das Auto, will be neuter. Similarly, a radio is a word that comes into German from foreign origin and will be neuter for the same reason, das Radio. Finally, an embargo is another foreign word which we call das Embargo. We now have the case of certain kinds of words which are really derived from other categories of words which will be neuter for that reason. And these are the infinitive verbs used as nouns. Now, if you refer to an action in the infinitive, like say coming as kommen or to come, if you want to talk about that as a strange kind of noun, you're talking about the coming of something, you refer to it still within that infinitive-ish form, kommen, but you add the neuter article before it, das Kommen, to signal that you are using it as a noun. Similarly, the going would be das Gehen. The knowing or knowledge would be das Wissen. Wissen is a cognate of the very old English word for knowing. If you read Old English texts, for example, or even the King James Bible, if they say that they did not know something, they say I wot not rather than I knew not. This is reflecting the very old understanding within the English language that, for example, a wizard is somebody with a certain kind of specialized knowledge or wisdom. So das Wissen within German is the knowledge or the knowing. Das Lernen is the learning. Das Denken is very similar to the thinking. And das Sein is being, the mysterious notion, which German philosophers like Heidegger and Hegel have written volumes on, trying to understand what is das Sein. That's really the verb to be, considered now as a neuter noun. The last example we'll consider here is those words in German ending with the letters I, U, M, or just UM. These are predictably neuter, like in the example of das Studium, which is study, or das Evangelium, which is the gospel. So this will complete this lesson on the definite article and the gender of nouns. I look forward to continuing this series with you in the next lesson.